This is Thorin's YouTube channel. Make sure you're tuning in, hitting subscribe.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Reflections, and my guest for this one is going to be Walle, who is an old-school Counter-Strike player from Sweden. Actually, let's just start there. There's actually a little bit of sort of almost like house cleaning at the beginning of this interview, Walle. We have to clean up, which is like, first of all, for anyone, I know back in the day there weren't that many video interviews, obviously, and a lot of the scenes were like, I say like siloed, like the Swedish scene had all the people doing the interviews in Swedish, and the German scene had all those websites reading more and stuff. So it wasn't actually the case. If people don't know, a lot of people haven't heard their favourite players talk on video if it's from the old school. So actually, I imagine some people are actually just discovering right now in 2024 that it's not Wally, it's Walle, right? Did you ever care about that? Do you mind? I mean, I'm sure every American says Wally or something, right?
Yeah, it's Walle in Swedish, obviously. And there was a lot of mispronunciation of my nickname. It was usually Wally. And I think sometimes I ended up saying it myself too. And that was also partly because the movie Wally.
Oh, right. I thought of that, yeah.
Yeah, it came out during my active career,
right.
So that was like the death sentence of
even
the
written the same way, almost, right? Sure, I hadn't even thought of that.
True. Yeah.
By the way,
it's only been right in Swedish, to be honest. In English, it's always been Wally.
Yes. Normally, I wait till the end of the interview if someone has like a current project, etc. But I think most people, if they see this interview, Walle, are going to assume it's like when I've done them with people like Bullen, etc. It's going to just be like a really old school player, which is going to only talk about things in the 2000s. It's never going to get to now. But I will just let people know. I'd like to give you the platform to say so. You've not only come back on Twitter and tried to sort of give your thoughts and be like sort of almost like giving opinion pieces about the community, but very recently you announced basically you're doing like a little project where you're going to sort of help people with branding and doing things like merchandising, right? And people will have seen you just did it with Heat. Can you tell us what's going on with this? Like, you're back in somewhere? And is this like just a side thing as a hobby? What's going on with this?
It's gonna be one part of what I'll be doing going forward. It's gonna be helping brands develop both their branding presence, but also merchandise, and that ties into what I was doing when I was away from gaming. Right. I was working a lot with clothing, and I actually owned several clothing stores. So okay. It's going to be a combination of my experiences with gaming and esport and clothing, and trying to help other brands improve their presence, because I've been writing both on Fragbite, the Swedish site, and on Twitter. My perception, since I've been running my own businesses for quite a few years now, my perception is that we have a lot of really good brands in gaming and esports. And what I tell people is that if you have a partner, they're going to do research on you and your brand, and a lot of the time it doesn't hold up to the level of work that they're doing. So that's what I want to help people improve, so that their work and brand is perceived as highly, because I think it's an industry thing that we only focus on having the Twitch or the Twitter presence.
Yes,
but we don't really think about how it looks for a non-endemic brand.
Sure.
And that was where I started thinking that I can absolutely help teams and organizations and influencers and creators to improve their overall brand, just to make it make sense for non-endemics, because most recently I've spent 7 to 8 years in the non-endemic world. So I think I have a good perception of what it should look like, and we're far from it to be honest.
No, by the way, I absolutely agree. Like, one thing I do think is a massive problem is if you ever talk to companies, they'll all admit all this, by the way. Like, you know, we need to level up our merch, we need to figure out like certain things, but they say it as if like it's something they're going to put off for years and years. But I agree with you. If I came in and I was an outsider, I mean, I even think people who come from other games, like if they don't know Counter-Strike and they hear some of the big names there, I even think one of the problems you have if you're a beginner is everything looks generic. Like, they're all kind of like mini clones of each other. So like the difference is, if I came into Counter-Strike now, I wouldn't know who is the Manchester United or the Liverpool of that. I wouldn't know. They all just look sort of generic. I could guess any of the could be the top brand. You know, it'd be kind of hard, right?
Yeah, and I think that's something that we need to look at, obviously, to find everyone's unique offering to partners and to fans and community. And you know, this is coming from, I'm an old professional gamer myself. I know how boring it is and how little they want to do it in the organizations and in the teams. But then again, I also have the non-endemic experience. And I know that if we're gonna ask for these amounts of money and sponsorships, we need to do more. And that's what my project is about. I want to help brands in gaming and esports grow so that they can also be more appealing to partners and to the fans and community, because that's obviously also how you're gonna build sustainable and maybe more revenue streams and long-term commitments from everyone, like the fans and the community. So I think it's really important. And my take on is that we are so focused on esports results in esports that we kind of overlook the overall branding.
Sure.
And I just want to bring my experience to it, because I've been doing it for quite some time now, and I genuinely would like to help gaming and esports brands develop, become more mainstream, to get better partnerships and get better connections to their fans and community.
Right, if we go back in the time machine then to start this interview, because as you said, you were a professional player. If we go way back, I actually have a detail a lot of people won't know. Like, they might, if they were enough of a nerd and they watched the early tournaments, know you played in one of your first teams was the one called LuLAN, obviously. But what they might not be aware of, Valle, is that's because you lived in a place called Luleå. And if people don't know, this may as well, the joke is this, if you're Swedish, this may as well already be Finland. It's like all at the top of Sweden. And it's so, like, I looked this up now. It is 900 kilometers from Stockholm, guys. Like, remember, Sweden's really long. It's right at the top, basically. In fact, I'm going to guess to even get there, you probably have to take some mental train all the way up. And I'm sure when you arrive, it's like one of those like Santa Claus movies, all just like snow stacked up. Is it like this? Is it ridiculous? And people don't, they're like, what they imagine what the north of Sweden's like. What was it like to be in Luleå, mate?
Oh, it's. I guess it's kind of ridiculous, because we have a lot of snow and it's really cold. And it's. I live far up north, and I was living in Luleå, like you said, when I joined my first team, LuLAN, and now I'm back in Luleå after a few years on the road, and it was Counter-Strike that took me, to new places, and I'm back far up north. But thankfully, it's only a 1 hour flight to Stockholm.
Oh, right.
So,
okay.
so I travel quite frequently to Stockholm because of work and stuff.
Right. Because the reason I bring this up is people might know that this is obviously the golden era of when, if you are like a good player in Counter-Strike, the joke is you basically only have to walk into a phone online or Team 9 cafe or go to a LAN in Stockholm and you have a chance to be famous. But you're not there. You're stuck in the fucking frozen Northlands. So did this make it a bit tricky to break into the scene? I know around this time, by the way, you were also quite young. You're like 16, 17, right? So how do you break into the scene if you're in the middle of nowhere? Surely everyone wants you to be in Stockholm or Gothenburg, right?
Yeah. I think I was 16 or 17. Yeah, that's correct. And I think that it was a lot harder than people realize. That's a good point, because for a long time, I was the only player from up north who actually made it to professional teams. And I'm not exactly sure why, but like in most sports or work or business, I guess you form some type of groups where probably it was easier to come into these groups if you were more locally than what I was. But I know that after my career, there were a few more who was from northern Sweden. I'm not exactly
I
sure
believe,
who.
just because I did an interview recently, I think Freiburg said that Exist is from the north or something. I think he said Exist also.
Exist is also from the north, and he was a few years after me, so
Sure.
that was good to see that we have more players from up here. But it's been rare, and I was always actually really proud to be one of the few northerners. We have a word for it in Swedish. It's norrlänning. It's when you're from the northern part of Sweden. I was actually really proud to be one of the few who actually made it from, because it was like in Sweden I got to represent a whole region of the country in Swedish Counter-Strike and in also in global Counter-Strike. And it's one of those things too that people take a lot of pride in. Like in all countries, if you're from a specific region, you're very proud of being from there. So that was a lot of fun, to be honest, to be able to be the representative of northern Sweden in Counter-Strike for a few years.
By the way, I understand. I mean, myself, if people don't know, I come from sort of like the least popular part of the UK. I come from the northeast, which is again up north, and obviously London similarly is down the bottom. And we have the same dynamic where the people who live in London think that's the only place, and as soon as you get beyond a radius, they think you're in the wilderness, basically. And obviously, I will say everything I've heard about Northerners obviously comes from people from Stockholm, so it's going to be a little bit skewed. But they even said that like it's not just like there's a term. They say like that Northern. They try to do that thing like they're a bit strange, you know, like they're all quiet and shy and not like us. Were you a quiet guy? Were you a bit more shy than other people? What were you like back then?
I don't think that I was either quiet or shy, but I wasn't the loudest guy either. I've always been, I think, someone who speaks their mind, but there are different people. There are those who speak first and think later, and those who think first and then speak, and I'm the later one. So I would pick my words and have a think about it first before. But what people think of when they think of me, it's what I believe at least, is that I've always been quite calm in my demeanor and when I play or how I behave. I'm a very calm and collected person, but maybe not shy.
Right. The interesting thing is, it wasn't like that was just a piece of trivia that you come from this place. The reason I also bring it up is you actually took a team from there, LuLAN, and managed to get top 6 at this CPL Copenhagen, the one that was like a top level tournament. It was basically all the best European teams up there. And when I go and look, here's all you need to know, Valle. In the modern day, obviously, we have like stats pages and wiki pages. If I go, you're the only one on that team that has a page, mate. The rest is all a book. Because obviously they never had professional careers. They never did anything beyond this. They never worked the CPLs. So were these just local guys? Who were the people you were playing with in this team?
In LuLAN, they were local guys, and it was a local internet cafe in Luleå. Right. So back in the day, there were internet cafes. Everyone who's about my age knows about this too. That's where you started playing, and that's where we hung out for many, many years in the internet cafes. And I think that this... the owners of the cafe had some type of open tryout for the team, and somehow I made it onto there. I was quite good already back then, so that was the reason I made it on. But the rest of the guys were a little bit more accomplished than me. They had played in some, I don't know, decent semi-pro teams, and they had bigger names than I did. But still, we were all from Luleå, and I was the only one who took the next step from that too. And that, I think that was also the case in a few of my teams, that I always tried to, also think career-wise, that, okay, it's sometimes uncomfortable to step out of a team and maybe, let people down. But I was a bit egoistic in that sense, that I knew that I had to move on to keep developing and to keep getting into better scenarios for myself.
Is it the case that, because I'm pretty sure, I remember I was obviously around back then, no one knew who this team was, mate. Like, if I go and look down here, there's plenty of other teams that, like, top Swedish teams, Finnish teams, Danish teams, loads of other squads people would expect to be further up than this squad. Was it a shock to you guys how well you were doing that? You get into, like, literally play against, like, Heaton and Botty and people like that in your first big LAN?
Yeah, for sure. I don't think that any of us were expecting to do any damage, and that's always been my favorite scenario, to be the underdog when you punch up. So that's always, we had some skilled players, and maybe people didn't know about us. So in that sense, we became the underdog for quite a while, and. No, I think every win was a surprise and a huge success for us. Even probably in practice too. We were raising the bar for every goal that we set.
Right. How is it that you came to join the SpiXel team, which is the one where people actually might start to know you? Obviously, this is the one where you were with Bullen and other players like that. And this people will know you went to ESWC. This was like a big team, another team that was kind of like, I will say, the other thing that goes behind this whole topic as well, maybe you can speak to, is this was also sort of actually when there was a bit of what you call like a sea change in English and Swedish Counter-Strike, whereas before it really was just the Heatons and Potties and those like first generation people dominated. Yeah. This was obviously the year where through teams like SpiXel, people came up, ballers, these people all came up and sort of were able to battle them. So how did you come to join this team? Because this is another squad that like really fast rise once this lineup is set.
That was, as you say, it was a really interesting time, because that was around the time that we were actually seeing that they were beatable. The old legends of the game who seemed unbeatable for so many years. So that was a fun period to be around, to be honest. When they started. You started seeing that you actually can beat them and you can be better. And I think that, SpiXel was also an internet cafe, and it was in Umeå, so that's where Exist is from.
Right.
So that was also in northern Sweden, and the owners of SpiXel, they started the internet cafe. And then I suppose they just decided that they should have a Counter-Strike team like everyone else did, all of the internet cafes, because we had leagues too where the internet cafes had their teams.
Yeah, so people don't know. It was actually, I will say, it was actually a genius idea. It's just obviously the financing wasn't there. The idea was they had a league in Sweden called Swedish Esport League, but the genius idea that the guy who used to be the old NIP manager realised was, we've already got all these amazing internet cafes on the internet backbone. Essentially, we can all play it throughout Sweden, but it'll just be like LAN ping. And so that actually was work. So the premise is when Walle was in like the LuLAN team, he's playing from up in northern Sweden, but you still have like 8 ping. You still have perfectly fine connection. It's actually quite a genius concept to see who's good around the country, not just in Stockholm, right?
It was really good because you had the local, all of the local teams were fighting each other. So in that sense, you had more, maybe you could have a higher sense of loyalty towards the team if they were playing from your city or from your region. So that was actually a really good thing. And I think, I'm not exactly sure, but back in the day, there was this player called Elite. He was quite good and quite famous too. He never really made it to the top level, but in Sweden, everyone knew who he was and knew that he was good. And he was from Umeå, so I think that the owners gave him the task of assembling the team. So he was kind of the team captain of SpiXel, Elite. So he... by then, I had made a name for myself, and people knew who I was and what I was capable of. And that's when he got, he noticed me and wanted me for the team. And we were all from northern Sweden too. We had 3 players from Umeå. So Elite, Crypt, and Hyber, I think, were the ones in the beginning. and they were all local, quite good, quite famous in the Swedish scene. So for me, it was really a move up because they were one step above me. And then we brought in Bullen as the last guy to this team, and that's one of the I believe in. I don't know if I want to call it fate, but things happen for a reason. And I remember that was a really tough one for me because when I played in LuLAN, I was 16 or 17, and I got the call to join SpiXel, but I had to move. I had to move
Right.
to Umeå at that age. So I was 17 probably. I was in high school in Sweden, second year, and you go 3 years in Sweden. And I get the call, and I want to do it because I feel like I'm good at it. I want to pursue it. And that's one of the toughest calls of my entire life. When I remember how anxious I was because I had to call my dad and tell him that I'm going to quit school to move to Umeå to join a Counter-Strike team, but they're not going to pay me.
Of course not.
You know. So that was.
It sounds like a hard sell, mate. It sounds like a hard sell.
Oh no, that was a really hard sell, and I can almost remember how anxious I was in my whole body, and my dad is there was a generational.
He's a traditional guy, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and he's quite a stubborn guy too. So that was a really tough one. But as I said, it's also those kind of things that I remember. You know, it was such an important milestone for me to actually, you know, when I look back, I'm quite proud of myself to just for the fact that I did follow my own gut and my dream.
You gambled on yourself, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, sometimes that pays off too. And I've also, you know, done some stuff that hasn't paid off. But I think that that's something that I've taken with me from that day. You know, that I trust my gut.
By the way, I also will just throw out there, if people don't know, the problem if you're a young person now is when he says like he's moving like that as a young, like the reason it'd be even more intimidating, I'd imagine, is the internet was very, like, obviously it was quite primitive back then. It wasn't a world where you could just find out how to do everything easily and every single thing's on Google. There wasn't even Google Maps, guys. Like there wasn't all that stuff. Like I can only imagine it. If you're 17, it must be really intimidating, like going to a new place. You don't know how things work. You're not sure what you're going to do for work. I mean, like you said, it's a pretty big gamble. This is actually the esports equivalent of those stories where, you know, you hear the stories in America, the person gets on the bus from the middle of nowhere and they go to Hollywood and they try and make it as an actor or something crazy.
Yeah, kind of like that, because I had no idea what I was getting into. I only knew that I wanted to play Counter-Strike, basically. And I moved to a new city, 17 years old, didn't know the guys I was moving in with, didn't know anything about the city. I had no security, no pay. So that was, you know, purely passion driven. And I can't really understand how I was able to make the decision as a 17-year-old. And I can't understand how my parents let me. But, you know.
Right. You almost think they should have said no now. They probably should have. They couldn't know it would work out. Yeah, they couldn't know.
Kind of a stupid take to quit school to move to.
What about this though? Were you at least like, did you actually think though, like I am the shit at Counter-Strike though? Were you already like good? Did you already think like I have a real talent and essentially if I give myself this chance, I'll make it? Did you at least have that going for you?
I knew that I was really good at the game. I can't say that I was sure that I would make it though. I wasn't sure of that. But during this time in LuLAN, I think I played so much and I felt like I was at such a high level, and maybe compared to my team too, that I knew that I could take a place in a better team. But I don't think that I ever really, you know, I wasn't thinking too far ahead. Like I was gonna make it, I was gonna make money. I just saw like the next step, and the next step was a slightly better team. That was the next step,
Right.
And then that kind of continued, the same trajectory from LuLAN to SpiXel and to the next. It was the same story, possibilities coming up and me actually going for them.
When you guys in the SpiXel team went to this ESWC qualifier in Sweden, again, guys, this is the Swedish qualifier. If people don't know, I always used to joke back in the day that like the Swedish World Cyber Games and ESWC qualifier are like an extra free tournament because Sweden's so good. Yeah. You just get all the top teams go crazy against you. They're trying to qualify for like 1 or 2 spots. Like on paper, again, your team's not supposed to be the one going. Like think how famous Sweden is. Like has all the great teams. So it was I remember even seeing this. It was like this is actually the result out here. Now it's this team to the world. Because people were like, who are these guys? And also, when you went and looked, as you say, maybe someone might have known I like, because like you say, he was on, like, I think, Experience or something back in the day, one of the semi-pro teams, like you say, but no one else was famous on this team. Like, I actually think everyone was shocked. So was it a shock to you guys too? Were you already practicing? Did you know you were good as a team?
I think that we probably realized quite early that we were good, because I think that we were practicing good teams too. And I think that for me, also going from LuLAN to SpiXel and ending up with the players like Bullen, I can't say that all of the other guys had the same level as me and Bullen. And obviously that's why we developed faster than they did too. But Elite, Hybrid, and Crypt were also really solid players. More like maybe today's anchors, right. You could trust them to do the job. But I think that we had a good sense of how good we were, and it's funny as you say, because back then, the Swedish qualifiers and the Swedish teams, that's what I miss, and that's what everyone misses, I suppose. It was such a battle of so many great teams, because you could have probably like 10 teams that were top 50 in the world only on that qualifier.
Absolutely.
So that was sick, and that was around the time that they started showing some weaknesses, the old guys, that they could be beat. So that was a really fun time, and I actually love that we got to do that journey together in SpiXel, because all of us were coming from something and trying to prove something, and also we were underdogs. So every time we actually succeeded was such a big victory for us. So that was a great time.
And the crazy thing is, like, if people aren't aware of your story, like, the surprises don't stop there, because when you actually went to ESWC itself, which I will explain to fans, in CS 1.6 there are no actual majors. Like, Valve doesn't go, this is a major, we essentially, as the community and players, just sort of decided which tournaments we liked the best, and so that's why we called ESWC and CPL and World Cyber Games, and later IM the majors. So, but there was already a sense like these are the big events. Like, essentially, if you win these events, you become the number one team, etc. When you guys go there, obviously, famously, ESWC is held in France, right? So first of all, if you're someone from Sweden and you come in the fucking north of the snow and stuff, that must be cool already, just to go to like a unique trip. And then secondly, again, the results, like, it's like a movie, mate. You guys get to go to the final and you're actually like that close for fucking winning this thing on the outset. Like, if people don't know, when the Titans with Wimp won, it was like 13-11. It was the closest possible score. Yeah. So this sounds like like I said, this sounds like a movie, mate. This sounds amazing, this trip. What was it like?
It was kind of a Cinderella story, I think. An old school Cinderella story. No one was expecting us to qualify, first off. And then, coming to that, it was a really big tournament. For us, it became quite surreal just to get to see all of the professional players and the venues, and you had audience and all of this stuff. It was really surreal. And I can't really understand how we managed to go as far as we did, but it was really a Cinderella story, and that was fun, because that was also the point in time where they started coming up, the Danish players like Wimp and all of the guys who later on became really strong. So that was like the starting point of their careers too. but it was a really unique experience that, for us, I don't really know how we managed to do it. I guess we had a lot of skill and no one really knew what to make of us. So it's like a dark horse or underdog story. And from that point, after that, everyone knew who we were. So that was also a career-making event for us, for sure.
Right, because I actually have a pretty decent memory for these things. One thing that people won't know is this Walle, which is another thing that at this exact time when you start to pop off that you were famous for, is the way it used to work was, remember guys, this is 2004. So if you're not enough of a boomer, YouTube doesn't even exist yet. Like there's not like even a made website for video. So back then, famously, if you want to watch a frag movie, you literally download it. Essentially, it's like an FTP link usually. And so one thing I would say was like a trend back then is when a player becomes famous, especially if they're like a Swedish player, they're always going to have their own frag movie, probably like one they edited themselves. And then what would happen is people like me would go, right, let's investigate. So we'd go and download those. And famously, your brother made the two Bröderna Wallenberg brothers, Wallenberg.
Yeah.
And these two movies actually were made before you were like in the later teams where you were all the success. I think some people get the wrong way around. I think you made them after you became famous. And I think they think you made them, Walle. As far as I know, your brother made them because it was all just like cool clips of you two in pogs, right? Or something. And this is when you were still on the way up or something, right?
Yeah. That was a thing of the past for sure. The frag movies, and that you actually had to download them, and you had them on your hard drive, and it was a totally different time. And the same with demos. I remember that early on on Fragbite, there was this feature where you could upload your own demos. So that was, it's not comparable to now because I could sit and play in LuLAN or SpiXel, and I could upload my own demos to Fragbite, and then I would sit and answer and interact with the questions.
Oh, right. So this is part of how you can get known, etc. Right.
From the fans and community. So
right.
I think that in the beginning, for me, I built a strong following of fans because I was so accessible to everyone. So it's not comparable to now because that was actually how we did it, uploading it ourselves, doing it ourselves, communicating with people who had questions and, trying to, pass on knowledge to them. So that was really special and something that I also enjoyed a lot, having that connection. It always felt special somehow that people cared what I did. So I tried to give back to that too. And as you say, I think that if we have three Wallenberg brothers movies, I have a fourth one that's only mine. That's called Tiffany Twisted.
Oh, sure.
And that's the only one that's like from professional.
Yes.
Yeah. And my younger brother, Mini Walle, he created all of the movies for us. And our movies, I feel like they're kind of cult.
Oh, the bangers. Mate, I'll tell you right now, not only were they amazing at the time, quite frankly, one of the reasons they were amazing was because back then, pros didn't usually themselves get involved with making the movies. So famously, you only had either official clips, and obviously wasn't a big sample size, or you had like randoms online that you don't care about. What made these videos insane, if people have never seen, you can go look them up. I'll put the links in the description box. The reason these frag movies are actually epic even now is because it's all like fucking pogs and scrims and all stuff. So essentially, there's so much sample size. I imagine you were able to just wait till you had amazing clips, because some of these clips are fucking bonkers. Like literally, like people would think you were cheating. Like some of these no scopes are like the craziest. Essentially, no joke, guys. It's like the best 1.6 clips you can ever see, basically. But it's because, like I say, it's from like a fun setting, right, where you can just kind of do whatever you want, I'm guessing.
Yeah, exactly. And we tried to also, I think that for my younger brother and for me, partly for me too, but mostly for him, he also wanted to incorporate the element of music into it.
Sure.
So I think that we always considered it having great music too, and I think that's also what some people remember.
It's aged from a certain period, I'm guessing. Right? Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure, right.
So
it's
if you're this generation, around this generation, it's gonna be a lot of nostalgia listening to it.
By the way, I actually do have a question about that topic, though, which is, like I say, obviously this isn't like you were in like a CPL final doing these clips. Like, that would be ridiculous. Like, it wouldn't even make sense to attempt some of them. But that's what I wanted to ask was, were you guys in any way like almost playing up to try and create clips for the video? Because some of those clips, Valle, even though they are like the best clip I've ever seen, some of them are, if I was like teaching a young player, I would tell them like, don't do that. Like, don't no-scope halfway across the screen. Just wait a second and re-scope. Like it wouldn't actually be like the ideal way to play it, but it looks amazing. So what would you say about that? Because some of these clips were absolutely bonkers, mate.
Yeah, I don't think that we were trying to create highlights actually, but we did create a certain play style that we used, in all of our games, and that was the way we played too. And I think that we also played back then. We played mostly, what phase it is today. So it was quite serious too. You couldn't really mess around and do stupid stuff. And I think that for me, I feel like I was quite early on adapting to movement and also being agile with the op. And that came from a lot of training that you can see in the clips and highlights, because that was how we played. So that also translated into later in competitive, you had an edge on a lot of players and teams because you were playing differently. What people today call, new metas of the game. That was what we were doing back then, early on.
What about look, obviously in this interview we can bounce around a little bit. A question that I'll attach to this and ask now goes like this. It's what I actually said to you on Twitter, which is, even though you actually did have, obviously we'll get into it, a very decorated professional career where you were in a top team and you were competing for the biggest championships, etc. One thing I actually did always find a little bit of a bomber, Valle, is I understand quite early on, it was only a couple of years later, you did things like become the in-game leader. And when someone's the in-game leader, they're very rarely going to be the AWPer. They're going to become more of a rifler. And then quite frankly, if you just know how Counter-Strike works, usually the in-game leader is probably just going to be in the entry pack. And just naturally, these decisions made you go down a certain path. But as I said on Twitter, if I was being selfish, mate, I wish we could just go back in a time machine and I could just be like the devil in your ear and tell you, don't do any of that shit, don't be responsible. Yeah. Just be the fucking diva up. Because, mate, if you'd actually played this playing style, I also think, even though you are like a famous, I think you could have been like fucking thought of like as a Spawn or, one of these names that are like the crazy one. Wouldn't you agree? You could have gone a different path too, right?
Yeah, I would agree, actually, that if I look at someone like maybe Kogu or Markolov, I maybe would have been able to be in the same category as them individually if I hadn't gone down the route of in-game leading. And I've also been expressing my opinion on it a lot on Twitter, that it's, in-game leading is it's a tough one, and it's not for everyone. And I do think that it would have been really interesting to see what would have happened if I didn't do it. But then again, I also feel like it really did fit my personality a lot.
Right.
I think that I'm the type of guy who should lead a team, like I did for between, I think for maybe 6 years, I was leading teams. I think that's something that I had that, my teammates maybe didn't do. And I had to sacrifice the op and a lot of individual skill to do the in-game leading. But I think that it is what I was the best role for me in the end.
Right. Or just since we can keep the topics together, since, as I said, I introduced your brother miniwalle when he made the movies. If people don't know, he was there was actually, even if people don't know, there's actually a third Valle. There was a micro Valle as well. Wasn't there like a third one as well? If people, so basically, at the time, obviously, you were the more famous one. Before we go to the next period when you become eyeballers, there was a period in SpiXel where miniwalle got to join the team. And as far as I remember, I'm going from memory here, but wasn't it something like, I think you even told me you did sort of just like force them to take him and sort of say, like, if you don't take him in the team, like I'm going to join another team. Was it something like that? Like you wanted to play with your brother at this point in time?
I don't remember in SpiXel, but I know that when in NIP, maybe that was
more right. Maybe case. I'm thinking of years later. Okay, could be.
Yeah, because I stayed in NIP when others.
I might be confusing the story. Right, fair enough.
Yeah,
okay. What about this then? What about your brother though? I know you tried briefly there, but did he not try the same as you to be pro? Did he only do it for a few? What was the deal with him?
Yeah, and I would say like this, he was always really skilled, and he could have been on my level, but I was more committed than he was.
Right.
And I would simply put it like he was playing some Counter-Strike, but he also had a life outside of Counter-Strike.
Right.
And I didn't, because I was playing non-stop. And that was the reason why I, got ahead of him.
Yeah.
I do think that we were equal in skill if we had put down the same amount of time. But he never really did put 100% into it, and that's because he had stuff going on outside of Counter-Strike, but he had the potential. If he would have decided to pour 100% into it, I think we would have been on the same level, and we actually played really well together. It's it's like a duplicate of me, so it's like having two really calm guys on the team that's never gonna stress you out, always gonna have the composure. So it was a good experience playing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I mixed up the Nip story later. Anyway, people get the premise. Another thing I would ask is this then. One of the reasons why I get the feeling why people who are old school like you always stress the idea like we played for passion is because if people don't understand, in the modern day now when people hear about the crazy salaries some of the players make, they now think like, right, well, now it justified putting all their hours in. And I always tell them, guys, all the time in all of history, when there was nothing to be made from games, the best players usually are the ones who, the term we even had back then was you're no-lifer. You just put your life in the game. It's like trying to be the best at chess. You don't do it for millions of dollars. You do because you're some weird guy who wants to be the best at chess. Like essentially, like you say, no one could really ever cynically be like, I'm going to get all the money. It's like it has to be. There's something driving you to be this good and play this much at the time, right?
Yeah, and I'm not exactly sure what, because nowadays you can motivate yourself with actually being able to make a very good living out of it. And I think that for me, and I guess most other people from that period of time, I was just really, really competitive. And I wanted to become the best at whatever cost. I wanted to be the best player that I could be and play in the best teams possible. And that was my driving motivation. And yeah, we were really just playing for the passion and to become the best. There was no financial benefit for us to do it. We would have been better off to actually get a job. But I think that maybe during the years you all also started thinking that maybe you can make it. You can actually make a living of it, and that's also motivated you more. But during the years that I actually developed and became really skilled, there was no other motivation than just, love of the game. And I wrote something on Twitter about that too when I played in NIP in 2005-06. We actually slept on the floors of internet cafes, and we were ranked,
the best in the world. Yeah, of course.
Top 5 in the world.
Sure.
So, we did. There was a lot of sacrifice to it,
Yes. Right. One of the big teams and big moments also in your career, obviously after this, was to join the AWPers team. And this was a very interesting setup because their team previously had been the champions of CPL. And so they'd upset SK and become the number one team. But they'd had the thing where then, as was the way it worked back in the day, SK Gaming was like, all right, you've beaten us. We'll take that hyper guy. Thanks. Like their best player, basically, which is how it used to work back then. It's also how those teams stayed on top, I noticed. They were really good and cynical at like picking the next best player. And so AWPers took the core of the team and then they rebuilt, and this was a genius rebuild because they just took you and Bullen from SpiXel, basically like the two non-SK best like star players in the region. And so if people don't know, this team was very hyped. It was almost thought of as like a super team. It's like, in fact, I remember, even though you guys came second at the CPL famously to NOA and Shagwa and those guys, the rumor I heard at the time, because I went to this event, was this AWPers team murks everyone in the fucking scrims, and this is like the sleeper best team in the world, and they're going to win this LAN. That's what everyone was telling me. What would you say about this AWPers team? Sounds like a very exciting project.
I think that it was probably true what you heard. I think that we were dominating. It became like such a super composition of players in that team with me and Bullen. We were basically joining as, star players who maybe was better than AWPer at that moment in time. So I think that we were actually dominating everyone in scrims. And that's also from where you have a lot of the highlights in Tiffany Twisted. Was from that period of time, from the scrims we did in eyeballers and maybe some officials too. But no, I think we felt like really unstoppable. And as I said, I always loved being in that type of team where you were always punching up. So it instantly becomes harder when someone is chasing you instead.
Sure. By the way, when you went to the CPL and you got to come second, right? Again, for people who don't know, like I'm trying to emphasize how different it is from the current pro scene you see here. This is obviously now you're going to America. So before you got to go to like France, then you went to a tournament there after you've already gone in Sweden locally, and now you're getting to go to America. By the way, back then in the day, you know this is like valid. Back then, especially actually Swedish people had a very like sort of almost idealized sense of America. They all thought it was really cool and wanted to go to Disneyland and have fucking had no burgers or whatever silly idea we all had back then before the internet. Like, so it was actually considered a big deal to get to go to these fucking CPLs.
Oh, yeah.
And again, you go there and it's not like you just went and it's like, oh, cool, we got great groups, like fucking 10th, so next time we'll do. No, you got to go to the final. By the way, one, what's it like to start like expanding out your horizons and going around the world? And then two, why is it that actually you were always succeeding in your first goals out? Were you not, like you said, you were calm, you didn't get nervous in these finals or anything? You were able to just actually succeed? A lot of people, it's kind of expected that you'll fail the first time when you get, acclimatized to a new setting, etc.
Yeah. No, it's I grew up watching movies, and I'm very my English isn't that great. It's decent, but I grew up watching movies. I'm very Americanized, or what do you call it? So when I got to go to the US and experience that, I was really, really happy because I grew up with that culture, watching it. And it's not like YouTube today where you take part so much of the culture. So that was really something that I'm really thankful for now, because I think that had it not been for gaming for me, I might not have moved from the little town that I was.
Right. Okay. You still be there now, right?
Yeah. And gaming actually took me, traveling the world, and I love the US. I got to travel there a lot, and I always, enjoyed it, and I loved the culture and the people there and the mentality. So that was huge, especially in the beginning. Of course, you get numb to the traveling, and you get used to it. But in the beginning, it really was amazing to be a part of. I came from a town with 4,000 people, and that's what I mean. Had it not been for gaming and quitting high school for me, doing all of this stupid stuff, I consider the person I am today has been formed from all of my experiences, traveling and meeting people, and that's also the prejudice that you meet as a gamer or a professional gamer or just someone who loves it. For me, it has actually led to more social development than the alternative would have been.
And what about this thing? Like I say, like most people, like think about the analogy is like in the Matrix. Obviously, he fails that first jump because everyone fails. In this scenario, you keep sort of almost making it, mate. Why was it so? Why were you able to sort of adapt so easily?
I'm not actually sure, to be honest. We always had a lot of confidence going into these tournaments. I mean, with SpiXel and with eyeballers. I think that we put in a lot of time practicing for it and having a boot camp, and everyone was feeling peak. And I would probably guess that also part of the success is that people didn't really have too much knowledge of us as players or as a team. So I would guess that it was pretty hard to play against us, having some new star players, someone you hadn't played before, and then we had a really sick lineup, and that was, I think maybe that's one of the ones that I look back on and like we probably should have won that one. I feel like we probably were in a better shape, but ended up losing the final to the more experienced guys. I think that back in that day, you only played 2 maps.
It's BO1, yeah. And it was the Bullen, obviously, so they came from the low bracket, yeah.
Exactly, and we lost the first one 11-13 maybe. So that was really close. And then the second map, I think we were just we didn't stand a chance. But I think that's probably gonna be the final that I wish I would have won the most.
Oh, sure.
Because I lost quite a few finals.
Yeah, I can give you some info. This is why I would definitely, I think the circumstances agree with your perception, because here's 3 pieces of info. One, you were in the upper bracket, and at the time, famously, because that's the thing everyone remembers, no one had ever lost the tournament from the upper bracket, because obviously you have 2 chances, whereas they have 1. So famously back then, everyone who came from the upper bracket won. 2, like you say, the first map was actually like 16-14, and by the way, I think they even win like a bunch of like 1v3s and some fucking insane shit in these rounds, like impossible. And then thirdly, and this is the one that you don't want to hear if you're a player, which is when I actually talked, because I was friends with people like Jaguar, they were even telling me at the time, I was at this event, like, things are going really badly behind the scenes. If we don't win this tournament, we'll probably just break the whole lineup up. So it's also one of those ones where, like, if they just sort of like lost earlier in the, like in the bracket stage to some random, they probably actually just collapse internally and just blow themselves. So it's one of those ones where it's like everything wrong happened at the same time, basically. So I get you on that one. You maybe should have won that one, mate.
I think that looking back, that's the one that I wish that I won. Yes. We had such a good team, and I feel like we should have won that one. Really good momentum and really good players, and that was also the first really good team that we were playing. Me and Bullen. So that was. Winning that first event would have been sick. I guess it would have been almost comparable to Donk winning his first event.
Sure. By the way, you referenced it, so it is something I wanted to ask about. This is what's funny is this is actually the sort of thing, even back in the day, I used to ask in the interviews that made me actually like, I wouldn't say popular, but I was Thorin even back then, guys, which is back then, obviously everyone was super polite and all fans when they were interviews. I am the sort of arsehole who'd be like, you've lost all the major finals you've been in. And the player's like, brilliant, thanks, yeah, like, okay, I'm like, fucking hell. And back then, people, we weren't as like psychological, even people didn't want to think about things like, did I choke? Was there some sort of problem? I mean, there wasn't even a concept of sports psychology back then. It was actually a really awkward question to ask, but I do want to ask it because obviously it's one of those things you look back on your career and the first thing you're going to think is like, I could have had these big championships, like you say. I could have had a status that comes with being the champion like that. Like, what is your take on that whole thing? Because obviously the reason why that is a complicated topic, even though I'm joking, is because it does veer into the domain of things like psychological things, like in the final, did pressure get to me, or was I just unlucky? Was I on the wrong teams? Should I? No. I don't know. What do you take from this whole topic? So, like you say, I'm sure if you think back on your career, it's one of the things you think about.
Yeah, I think that there are a few finals where I maybe feel like we should have and could have won. And then there were a few finals that, the better team won.
Sure.
And from what I can actually probably remember the ones, that was one of them, CPL with the eyeballers. I feel like we should have and could have won that. I think that some people know this about me, but I placed second on all of the big events. Yes. I never really won one of the big events.
Yes.
Even though I played in, the best teams for a long time. So that was the one. And then we have the final versus Pentagram.
Oh, World Cyber Games, yep.
World Cyber Games, and I think that we went into that final. That's where I had the 1v5 too.
Yes, it is.
In the final of that tournament. And I think that we went into this...
You guys were the favourite.
As favourites,
This is when they were still rising up, yeah.
Yeah. And they beat us as underdogs. And that one still can make me frustrated.
Sure.
that we didn't keep the composure as favorites. And as I said, it's tough to be the favorite and people are chasing you.
Sure.
And that was around the point that they were really starting to, after that, they were a team to be counted on in every tournament from their fourth. But it kind of pisses me off that we were the first team
you welcomed them in.
Right,
sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that kind of pisses me off, to be honest. And,
sure.
and also in the final on train, I did the 1v5. But they still crushed us.
Yes, a lot of people don't know that. Even though that one clip it's sensational. Everyone loves it, but they don't know you actually lost the game, unfortunately.
No,
true.
And that kind of pisses me off too. That it didn't help.
Yes, exactly. You want it to be like the round from the game you won, obviously, so you can think of it fondly. Sure.
I wanted to.
Yes.
You want it to be, if you pull that off, you want it to be the game changer and the momentum changer. But no, they stuck with it, and I think that they played. I think that we were well prepared and we were good at that time, and I think that they played a hell of a final, to be honest.
Sure.
So that one is gonna haunt me too. And then we have versus MTW. I think the Danish guys, Sonic and Ave, and I don't remember Wimp.
Yeah, Sunday, all those guys, yeah.
And was this WCG too, I think?
Yeah, that was World Cyber Games as well, yeah.
Yeah. And that's also one that I think that we could have and should have won. Because it was the similar story to Pentagram. That was the starting point of MTW becoming dominating.
Right.
So we were also like we opened the door, their first... that was when they kind of went into an era. Of being, they were really, really good back then. Those are the finals that are gonna haunt me versus MTW, Sonic and the guys, and Pentagram and the CPL with eyeballers.
Well, the good news is, at least to be fair, if we look at all these names, it's not like you lost to a one-off random that never did anything. You weren't losing to like Jaguar and Method and like you say, like Neo and fucking, even in this case, like Zonic and like, these are the greatest players of all time. So, but I get what you mean. If you are in the top team and you're favoured, you want to at least win some of these. You want to get
and like in the later parts of my career, I think that I was beaten by better teams.
Right, fair enough.
To be honest, we weren't peak all of the years.
Yes,
but a few years, like 2006, we were ranked number one, and we were number one too.
Yes.
I think it's just unfortunate for me that we didn't play any major events that year because we had the lineup with Set, Ins, Spawn, and Robban.
Oh, it was
myself.
A stock team, yeah, exactly.
So that was the best team that I ever played in 06, and I wish we had more opportunities to win more that year.
Hear me now, because the thing is, I wouldn't be able to get all the work I do without my brethren, the Mandem, in the Skrilluminati, my Patreon community, because this video, like all of them on my channel, is kindly supported by Frisky, Matt Pugnaccio Rakula, Ahmed Haju, Jensen Gore, Tobias Bernasconi, Animosity, Toucan, Tosh, and you know it, a special thanks always goes out to Jerky's Minion, who always has my back. Would you like to ask a question in my regular AMAs? Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest I could take in my work? Do you want teasers? Find out who the upcoming guests are going to be. Maybe you want to be part of those lengthy esports discussions I do with my top donators. Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today, where? Via the Patreon link in the description box below.